Welcome to season 2 of No Romance Without Finance. In today's episode, we sit down with Madeleine Frank Reeves in the Cosmopolitan offices. Madeleine is a deputy editor at Cosmopolitan magazine. A Harvard graduate with more than a decade of magazine industry experience, she recruits writers, sources, pitches, and shapes content for Cosmo on their website and in the print magazine. In today's episode, Madeleine walks us through her career journey and how moving to Alabama after college turned out to be the best financial decision she could have made. We also get into the truth behind the flashy lifestyles of social media stars. And then we talk about how tough conversations around money can actually make your relationship stronger than ever before. Welcome to No Romance Without Finance. Today we are in Hearst Towers in the Cosmo offices, which is so cool. I love being here. As a little girl, you read Cosmo and you're like, oh my gosh, I wonder where these magazines are coming from. But today, very, very fortunate to have the deputy editor of Cosmo, Madeleine, here with us. She is a very, very accomplished woman, and her background is so amazing. We're all going to learn so much from her and how she came up in the industry and how, she's become successful, and also her thoughts on relationships and money, because she is a self-made woman and she probably can support herself, and how that works in her relationship. So we're just going to get into it. Madeline, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for coming to our office today. It's kind of a fun pink and animal print palace and all I hope all the things you would hope a Cosmo
Yes.
office would
It
be.
really, I
Yes.
love this room. It is amazing. I love it.
Mhm.
So I wanted to start with your story, because I want to know, how the hell did you get here? How did you become the deputy editor of Cosmo? How did it all start?
Yeah, I it sounds so cheesy to say, but I really do pinch myself every day because this is the dream job. This is um the job that I have wanted for as long as I can remember. I
Right.
think working in magazines, I'm very fortunate that I knew what I wanted to do from a very young age. I
Right.
was very drawn to these magazines that would come to my mailbox every month.
Right.
I'm about to turn 32, so I very much grew up in that age of the monthly magazine that you get is,
Hmm.
we don't have YouTube makeup tutorials, we don't have
Sure.
social media influencers that we're following.
Right.
That was really my window to the world, and felt like, curling up with a friend and learning something. And so from a very young age was very fascinated with who puts these together.
Right.
It was also very much that time of movies like 13 Going on 30 that really showed the perhaps overly glamorized version of what working in magazines could be.
Yes.
And so that was appealing as well.
Yeah.
I'm still
Until
waiting.
Devil
Oh,
Wears
right,
Prada.
until Devil
Until that
Wears
movie.
Prada, yeah, although there was a little glamour there too, to
Yeah,
be
there is.
sure.
There is.
I'm still waiting on my, Jenna Rink style closet that walk I'm like, what day does that just show
Yeah,
up,
right. Exactly.
But yeah, so it was really drawn to that. Um, I also have always loved English. I've loved writing and reading and reporting, from like being the editor of my high school newspaper to I went to Harvard for college. I worked on campus publications there. I interned in college, all very much with the end goal of wanting a job at a magazine in New York City.
Mhm.
So going into my junior year of school, I interned in the Teen Vogue fashion closet. Speaking of, Devil Wears Prada and all of that,
Mhm.
the fashion closet of it all. And that was again in this era of like the Hills when Lauren Conrad had interned in the Teen Vogue
Sure.
fashion closet. I think I ran around a lot more than she did on that show. I have like, if you think about that show, she's kind of sitting at her
Yeah.
computer, like crying about
It,
boys. There's a lot more
right.
running around than
It's a
that. Yeah.
lot. It's not as glamorous,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of work that goes into
Yeah,
it.
it's
Yep.
very tough work.
Mhm.
So the following summer, I interned at the Oprah magazine, which was actually here in the Hearst Tower,
Wow.
and that was through the American Society of Magazine Editors has an internship program, and I loved the work there. I mean, I that was in 2012. I just had the best time. I got to do things like Oprah interviewed the Obamas and the Romneys for an issue,
Wow.
and I got to transcribe her interviews with them.
Oh,
So got like the raw audio recording of her doing these
wow.
interviews. Just the coolest things every day. I got
Incredible.
to pitch and write a piece for the magazine.
Hmm.
I loved it. And, all the while I was living in New York City with friends from college. That summer, my college roommate Megan and I shared kind of the living room of her older sister's apartment, and I slept on an air mattress all
Wow.
summer. And we had a great time. But I got this kind of window into, okay, if I want to move to New York out of school, I know I'll have student loans. I
Hmm.
know all of my friends from Harvard will be working in finance or
Right.
in consulting, making a lot more money than I will
Sure.
be. Um, and it's competitive to get a job, so I'm lucky if I even get that. And I just kind of played the tape forward of what does this look like, and was definitely willing to make the lifestyle sacrifices if that was the only option available to me. But my mind was very open to what else could I do. Um, and I remember so well this one day working at the Oprah magazine, and there was this very senior level editor who
Hmm.
was so chic, and she was just like always wearing a new bag and a cool outfit, and everything
Yep.
went together. And she had just gotten back from this big fancy vacation, and
And you're like, I want to be her.
yes, I'm
I
like,
want to be her.
that is
Yes.
my role model. I'm like, if I
Yep.
just like keep my nose down and keep working hard, that can be me in, however many years.
Yep.
And definitely had that, like, put people like that on a pedestal.
Yes.
Um, and, this is while I'm like making beans and rice for dinner and scrimping and saving. But I'm like, one day I could be there. And I remember so well, a colleague of hers was complimenting her one day, like, oh, you have the best style. You always look so chic.
Yeah.
And she laughed off. She's like, oh, thanks. It comes with a lot of credit card debt. And I was
Yes.
like,
Yes.
oh, it was just a record scratch moment for
Yep.
me as, a college student who, for one thing, people don't talk that openly about their
Sure.
finances in a lot of cases. So you see somebody with all these fancy things and you probably think, oh, they're doing well. And I just saw this like flash into my future of knowing that I like nice things and
Yep. Yep.
knowing that I can be privy to the temptations of kind of keeping up with my colleagues, whatever that
Uh-huh.
may be. And so it really stuck with me. It kind of shook my worldview a little bit. And um, yeah, I went back to school for my senior year, and I thought, okay, I'm going to move to New York. I'm going to be a magazine editor. But I still had this thought at the back of my head of like, is that the best? Is that what I'm gonna do right now? What
Hmm.
does it look like day to day? And, if I'm even lucky enough to get a job.
Right.
And everyone I met with that summer, I was constantly constantly asking editors to meet for coffee and help me understand how they got their jobs and
Sure.
teach me about, networking and teach me about the industry. And everyone said, move to New York, without a job after graduation, and then apply like crazy to jobs. And I was like, oh, but with what money am I
Right. How am I
living
going to
in this house?
exactly?
How do we do this?
Exactly.
So that was in the back of my mind. And then as I did more and more research into job hunting, I found that there are actually a few other places where you can work for a national magazine. And which, I think local magazines are also wonderful.
Right.
But there's a few other places where you can work for a national magazine and not live in New York City. So
Right.
Iowa has some, Pennsylvania, and Birmingham, Alabama was a location that had a big office with several magazines. So Coastal Living, Southern Living, Cooking Light, Food and Wine is down there now. And I had never thought about moving to Alabama.
Hmm.
I grew up outside of
Yeah, I mean,
DC. Yeah,
Alabama of
there's
all
a
places.
lot of
That's
things.
where my
Yeah.
cousin Vinny was in, right? They were in Alabama. It's
Yes,
like, oh
yes.
my
It is funny.
God.
There's a lot of Alabama in pop culture in so many ways.
Right.
It comes up constantly. And, you know, strangely enough, and just in a true like kismet, what's meant to be will be kind of situation, my now husband, we had started dating his senior year of college, my junior year, and he is from Alabama, of all places. And he had moved back down there. So I was like, wait, there's magazines there.
Right.
This person I love is there. He loves it. Maybe there's something to it. So I went down and visited and really enjoyed myself. It was so different than I think what I would have thought, to the extent that I even gave it any thought.
Right.
And I applied for this job that was open at Coastal Living while I was a senior in college. And I got the job with 2 months before graduation. They waited for me to move down. And when I
Wow.
tell you, like, think about a dream job, I was doing travel writing. I was going to these
Wow.
incredible resorts. I was writing about beautiful houses. And I
Wow.
got this like amazing hands-on experience because we had a really tiny staff. So the job was great.
Mhm.
But perhaps more importantly, in the context of talking about finances
Mhm.
and for your audience, living in Alabama was incredible because the cost of living is far below the national average.
Right.
And so I moved down there after college. My rent was $600 a month on
Wow.
a beautiful one-bedroom apartment. It had 6 closets.
Wow.
It was in a great part of town with all these parks around. Everything about it was, like, easy, you know,
Mhm.
and I could put money towards my student loans. I could live a reasonable life there and start
Right.
and start putting some money towards savings. And I always tell people this when I meet with high schoolers or college students.
Mhm.
I think if you're a really ambitious person who
Mhm.
sees really big things for yourself,
Yep.
you may think that you need to live in a major city
Right.
to accomplish those
Right.
things. And not only do I not think that's necessarily true in the long run, I certainly don't think that it's the only path after college. And in fact, I think that looking at all of the options immediately after college can be beneficial, not just for your financial picture and
Mhm.
well-being, but even from a career standpoint,
Mhm.
because working on some of these smaller staffs, or for folks who work at, say, a local magazine where people are really scrappy and you get to do a lot, you get
Sure.
this incredible hands-on experience. Now that I hire people, what I'm really looking for is, what is their experience? What
Mhm.
are they bringing to the table? What have they gotten the opportunity to do? And I think if you are strategic, you can do that wherever you are.
Yep.
So it's a long-winded
No,
answer of
that's
how I got
great.
here, but it's, I think, an unusual, and I love Birmingham. I have to give a shout out to it. The food scene there, like, still
Really?
still many of my favorite restaurants are in Alabama. I get
Wow.
to go back and visit often, and I lived there
Good.
for 5 years.
That's amazing. So there's a lot to unpack, and I want to go back, and one thing I want to highlight is your education, the fact that you went to Harvard. I think that's so important that you value education, because I don't think it's really valued as much as it should be. For me, I'm Iranian. My parents barely came to my undergrad graduation. They're like, "This is nothing." Once you graduate law school, then we'll talk. Because Iranians are very education focused. But the fact that you went to Harvard and the fact that you focus on education, I think is really important. And do you think that opened doors for you?
Oh, there's so much to unpack there. I think Harvard is wonderful. I had the best experience there.
Hmm.
I'm so grateful for the education that I got. I think a lot of what helped me to get there
Hmm.
is the fact that I was really good at taking tests when I was 16 and 17 years old.
Really?
And I don't
Okay.
think that means that much, if I'm being honest. I know so many
Yeah.
incredibly smart people, whose paths have looked different,
Yeah.
and, has it helped open doors for me? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But I will say again, when I'm hiring, an Ivy League education is not something
Sure.
that I hold to this highest priority, because I think someone can have an incredible story where maybe academics weren't important to them in high school, whether it
Sure.
was because um it just wasn't important to them at the time, or because they had family things going on and
Hmm.
they maybe didn't have the support system that I had
Sure.
of a family that valued that. I think I'm so grateful for the education I had there,
Yep.
the experiences, again, the connections, the fact that when you see Harvard at the top of a resume, it does something for you.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. But honestly, when I am evaluating other people, I try to push that aside, if that
Yep.
makes sense.
No,
Yeah.
that does make sense, and I think it's really great that you said, you were good at taking tests, because I have ADHD and dyslexia, so I was horrible at taking tests. So while my grades were good, it was hard for me to get in law school because I couldn't score well on the LSAT. So I couldn't go to the top tier law school. But it's really what you make of it. I think that's so important. And I love your story for another reason. And one of the reasons I really love your story is because I can't tell you how many comments I get on my posts where I talk about being financially independent and being financially secure. And they say, "Hey, boomer." I'm not a boomer, I'm Gen X, but whatever, I don't care. But boomer, when it was during your time, you could
Mhm.
buy a house working minimum wage. I'm like, in what world could you buy a house working minimum wage? That wasn't the fact. In fact, when I was in law school, I was working three jobs. I was going to law school full time in Chicago, Loyola, and I was working two waitressing jobs, and I worked at a law firm, right? So at no point was it easy for me or even my parents. And I think this generation just doesn't understand that sometimes you have to make sacrifices in order to be able to be financially secure. You can't just live it up, move to New York City at the age of 22 with no money, like they were encouraging you to do so, right? With no money, try to figure it out, pay, thousands of dollars for rent versus $600 that you were paying, correct? And go into debt, not being able to save, not being able to pay off your student loans. And people are like, "Well, you should just pay me more," right? And that's just not the way it works. I think what's missing is, and what you did, which I really love, is that you took control of your finances and you figured out that, hey, no one's going to come help me. So I better figure out how to manage my finances in a way where I'm not in debt. And I want to know, where did that knowledge come from? Was that instinctual? Did your parents teach you that?
It's funny because when you like look back on things, I think I do wonder how much of it is that I lucked into that situation.
Mhm.
Is there a parallel path world where it went differently?
No
So I
such
think,
thing as luck.
right.
No
Well,
such
so,
thing
so
as,
but that's
yeah.
why I love to talk about it because I
Yeah,
think, to your point about your story, I think when you see someone who has accomplished so much, who has has done incredible things and is at a point in their life where you think, oh, I'd like to get there. It's really helpful to hear what it took to get there and whatever
absolutely.
their story was, and to approach that, I think, even cross generationally, to
Yes,
approach asking people about their story from a place of compassion isn't even quite the right word, but like wanting to really know and
of
understand them and
course.
what it, took
Right.
to get them there. So I think if anything I could give myself credit for, it's that as a journalist, I like to ask questions.
Yes.
So I like to ask people
Yep.
about their stories like
Right.
that, and
Right.
I think that being naturally inquisitive, I guess it's a fine line between inquisitive and nosy, but
Right.
I think when when you come from a place of admiration for someone,
Sure.
they're often willing to open up to you a bit and share about what it took them
Exactly.
to get there.
And, I have not met one person who is really high up in their career and who's accomplished a lot that hasn't gone through a lot of shit,
Mm.
right? For lack of better words.
Yeah.
Like, regardless really of who you are, Bill Gates went bankrupt 13 times. Tesla was on the verge of bankruptcy. I mean, like within days of being bankrupt. No one sees that. No one sees like Elon Musk sleeping on the floor of his office, right? That's not what you see. What you see is, the success, right? But success is built on the back of hard work, first of all, and a lot of failures, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we love a highlight reel, right?
Yes, yes.
We love to show the good that, It's funny, this job is very glamorous in so
Mhm.
many ways. I mean, we have over there down the hall, we have a free table where every once in a while one of the beauty editors will just like drop off 30 lipsticks and it's
Oh
like
my
who want,
gosh. I gotta
like
go see that
who's yeah,
table.
yeah,
Let
exactly.
me
It's
stop
like
by the
or we'll
table.
have celebrities walking in the door to go film a video. I mean, there are so many parts of this job
Yeah.
that are very glamorous. But I joke with friends a lot, or when people ask what I do,
Mhm.
I spend a lot of hours staring at my computer screen and,
Right. I mean, you're a writer at
right,
the end of
yes.
the day.
Yeah,
You're a journalist. You really
yeah.
are, you know?
It's a lot of, editing a 4,000 word cover story
Right.
or, um, things that are less glamorous to show on social media for sure.
Mhm.
They don't make for as pretty of pictures, but
Right. And that's another thing that I really want to talk about is on social media, just like you saw that the woman that was dressed so well, but she's like comes with a lot of
yeah.
credit card debt. What people don't understand is the stuff that you see on social media is very fake. It
Mhm.
really, really is. First of all, the people with real money, I mean real money, are not showing you their purses on Instagram, right? They're not showing, themselves on private jets, rarely. They're not showing, their Birkins. Those people don't have to do that. It's, I say, the fake famous people and the B or C list celebrities. Like, and I'm a huge, don't get me wrong, like, I'm a huge Housewives fan, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
watch that all
Love a
day,
Bravo
right? Yeah,
moment.
I do.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love Bravo. I
yes,
watch all that
yeah.
stuff. But it's, it's the housewives that have to build that image.
Mm,
So, for example, Kim Zolciak, she has $1 million tax lien.
mm,
She has to sell off her bags. And her daughter is now doing the same thing, right? But if you look at her Instagram feed, it's all this glamorous life, and
mm,
all show and no go.
mm,
And people don't understand that the way that that whole Instagram thing works is when you become semi-famous, your goal is to get as many followers as possible so you can get sponsorships, right? So people will pay you to, promote their goods or even your own goods, right? And the way that you get sponsorships is by flossing, for lack of better words, showing because people will like it more and like it more. And that costs money, right? So if that costs money, then you have to understand that those people are going to debt to put themselves in that situation.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to conflate, as I did in college when I saw these people with these nice things. I think it's really easy to conflate having things with
Right.
having success. And,
Exactly.
to speak from a vulnerable place, I have found that the times that I am most susceptible to buying myself something nice
Mhm.
that I haven't planned for,
Right.
or yeah, clicking on an Instagram ad and buying the thing. The times that I most want to treat myself are
Mhm.
when I'm feeling a little bit insecure in whatever part it is of my
Yes.
career. Maybe I'm feeling
Yep.
like, "Oh, I'm doing this new thing and I don't quite know how to do it yet and I'm feeling a bit insecure about it." And it's almost like my brain wants to jump 3 steps to like, "But if you have the thing,
Right.
then you're
Absolutely. Oh
successful."
my
And you always
god.
have to remind yourself like,
Yes.
"Oh, there's that pattern.
Yep. It's
There's
a
that
form of
thing."
validation.
Yes, and you need
That's
to,
what it
like,
is.
sit with the discomfort, sit with that vulnerability,
Yeah.
and then I still love to treat myself to something
Of
nice when
course. Of course.
but from a place of, thinking ahead and planning for it and not trying to make myself feel better.
Right. Absolutely. And again, there are so many studies that show that people buy nice things as a way to make them feel better about themselves, as a form of validation. Look what's on my arm. It's if the same purse didn't have the Gucci logo, no one would want it, right? So it's a form of validation, which I love. So, one thing I want to get into is finance and relationships because that is what this podcast is about. And I've always said that before you even think or consider marrying someone, spending the rest of your life with someone, you have to know about their finances. I mean, I always say you have to know their credit score because, and they're like, oh my God, credit score. Why credit score? Because you can't do anything without a good credit score. You can't rent an apartment without a credit score, right? A good credit score. So You have to know their credit score. You have to know how much debt they have. You have to know what their financial goals are. If your goal is to buy a home, is that their goal? And if that is your goal, can they contribute to you buying a home, right? Or are you going to have to be paying for all of it? This is something that people just do not talk about until after marriage, and that is just way too late. So, what do you think about that? I mean, you're a successful woman, you're married, right? You're a successful woman, you're married. What are your thoughts around that?
I think it's kind of like everything else in that you really want to communicate about it before it's an issue.
Right.
I think ideally you're, yes, communicating about things, not just, being transparent about your financial picture, but about all these elements of your life before you just decide to spend your life
Yes.
with someone.
Yes.
Yeah, I think these conversations are uncomfortable, right? And
Mhm.
it's hard. And I have a couple of thoughts on that note specifically
Yeah,
around
let's hear it.
the hard conversation of it
Sure.
all. So one is that, you know, I kind of equate, so my husband and I have been together for 12 years. It'll be
Lucky
our
him.
yes.
I hope he's
Oh,
listening. Lucky
he
him.
will. He will. He's the absolute best. Our seventh wedding anniversary is coming up, September
Amazing.
24th. So we've
Amazing.
been together for a long time, and we have figured out, I mean, we were both working from our one bedroom apartment for all of lockdown,
Mhm.
we have really figured out some stuff about communication over the years. And I was talking to a friend recently who was in a newer relationship about, something he and I had discussed, and just kind of figured out. And she was saying something about, a fight that they'd gotten
Mhm.
into, and feeling uncomfortable afterwards. And I kind of equate it to, and this is one of my biggest hobbies is working out.
Yeah, me
I
too.
love a good class. I love
Me
a good
too.
gym session.
Yeah.
I love a good lift. So you'll
Do
appreciate
you go
it.
to Barry's?
I do. I've been having some ankle sprain
That's
issues, so I
why I
haven't been
stopped
in a while.
going. I
Yes.
used to go. I went to the original Barry's boot
Oh
camp
my
in
gosh.
Los Angeles. Yeah. I was
Wow.
going to the OG one for years. And
So
then,
cool.
yeah, it's really hard on your body, right? And
Yeah.
this isn't a knock on Barry's. It's the
Yeah.
best
No,
workout
I
ever.
love it.
But
I'm, like, desperate
yeah,
to go back.
yeah, but
I'll
it's
do
hard on
double
your
floor
body. Yeah.
sometimes. I do. I love, I have to give them a shout out. I went this morning to KK Sweat
Oh,
is
what's that?
a studio in the city. The instructor is incredible, and it's very low impact,
Ah,
but still kind of gets you that, like, excitement of a Barry's,
very cool. I've never
the
heard of
lights
it.
and the music.
Yeah.
Great. And then I also love Pilates. I go to Brooks Pilates here in the
Uh-huh.
city. So you'll appreciate this analogy.
Yeah.
When you do a new workout and, like, if you were to come to KK Sweat with me
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, you would not be able to walk the next day. Like,
Right.
even if you're in great shape, it's like a
Right.
new workout, working certain muscles different ways.
Yes.
You're sore, and then you do like a little bit more in the workout each time, and
Mm-hmm.
eventually, as you get used to it, your body builds up that resistance. And it's,
Right.
if you think about how we build muscles, right, is we
Mm-hmm.
create these tiny tears in our muscles,
Yeah.
and then the muscle repairs and grows back
Right.
stronger. So I think that's a lot like relationships. If you
Mm-hmm.
think about having a difficult conversation, even a fight, you're creating this little tear for a second so that it can come back stronger,
I
and you
love
can
that.
build it back stronger. And, after 12 years together, we are like bodybuilder competition ready. We're like, all right, let's bring it on. We can talk about
Yeah.
anything. We've done it, but I was talking to this friend about it in the sense of, like, you might be a little bit sore right now. You guys had this, but you'll build back stronger.
Right.
So I think putting little fights or little discussions, as it were,
Mhm.
in that framing helps to think of it not as a bad thing,
Sure.
not from this place of, like, oh, we shouldn't fight, it shouldn't be awkward.
Mhm.
But to think about how you're growing as a couple. So I think when it comes to finance, having the uncomfortable conversation, you might create a little tear, you might have a
Mhm.
little hangover, you might have a little muscle
Right.
soreness,
Right.
but it will really help you build back stronger so that when things get difficult, you can handle it together. So that's the first thing I would
I love
say.
that.
Yeah, I think that, it's so important. The other thing I would say is talking about finances with our romantic partners, somebody we're dating, or someone
Mhm.
we've been with for a long time, it can be hard, but
Yep.
so can talking about it with your friends,
Right.
and a lot of folks don't do that. And so I like to suggest, if you just want to get better, it's a skill, it's a muscle, you have to flex a little
Mhm.
bit.
Right.
Maybe you can practice with your closest friends,
Right.
opening up in a vulnerable way to have those conversations and just get that practice that you can then bring to a romantic relationship where the stakes are a little bit higher about being on the same page about money.
I love that. I love everything you said. I love that analogy. And it's really about being vulnerable too, right?
Yes.
And you have to be willing to be vulnerable in any relationship, especially, your significant other. And being vulnerable means that you're not always going to talk about the stuff that you want to talk about. You're going to have some tough conversations. Like
Mhm.
my fiance and I, we have tough conversations. And I have a rule in my head is that anytime I don't want to talk to him about something, I feel weird talking to him about something, I make it a point to do it
Yeah.
because that's where the magic happens, right? That's where the real vulnerability is, where you're just feeling sick to your stomach, bringing this up to him.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, then you're just not communicating the way you should be. And so finances is one of those things. And I think one thing is that, it's been taboo in our head to ask about how much money do you make? That seems to be a
Mhm.
taboo, which shouldn't be if you're going to spend the rest of your life with someone. We know what he or she likes to eat. We know the types of movies this person likes. Are
Mhm.
we compatible in every other way except finances? That's
Mhm.
something that we don't talk about. So, yes, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, but the more you talk about it, the easier it is. And really, it is beneficial for the both of you, right? I mean, when I talk about finances, or it should be beneficial because he should know what I have and I should know what he has,
Yeah.
vice versa. Maybe I'm the broke one. Maybe I'm the one that needs to explain myself, for lack of better words. But I think that's really, really important. And in your relationship, do you feel that you are financial equals? How do you maneuver in your relationship?
Yeah, it's interesting because again, we've been together since so early in our
Right.
careers. And I think too, just to kind of double click on something you said about how, whoever the listener is, like to whoever's listening right now, if
Yeah.
you're the one who feels like you're bringing something to the relationship that maybe financially that you're not proud of or are
Mhm.
working on, I would also just love to kind of take away the shame in that, because I
Yes.
think
Yes.
if it's something that you're working on and that you're able to bring to them as, can we work on this together?
Right.
I think that's, so important. But yeah,
Mhm.
we it's so interesting. We've talked about money a lot because I think I my inclination is a little bit more spendy. I like
Mhm.
to splurge.
Yeah.
I all of that.
Right.
I have a taste for luxury sometimes, as it were.
Yes.
And my husband, when we met, was very much hated to spend money.
Yeah.
He loved to see his money, like from the time he was a kid, loved to keep his birthday money in his piggy bank. Like he was that weird kid who like kept his money in his piggy bank year after
Yeah,
year
my
through his
fiance is the same
birthdays.
way.
Yeah.
I swear he's the same way. Yeah.
So
Saver.
yeah, so I think we've met somewhere in the middle where, we've been able to help each other out through learning about each other. And I think that the main way we've been able to do that in a way that feels really good for us is
Mhm.
by aligning on value-based spending
Mhm.
and sitting down as a couple, not just once, but ongoingly, to say, what are our, say, three main values in life right now? Like, what's really important to us that we want to feel good about spending money on, like, which by percentage of budget may seem weird to somebody else who doesn't share
Sure.
that priority.
Sure.
What are our top things and where are we willing to save a bit? So, for example, neither of us are big interior design
Mhm.
folks. Neither of us
Okay.
care about having a ton of space in our apartment. So we have been in our same apartment for 5 years, and I think a lot of people when they move in together, you see them be like, oh, well, I spend this on rent and you spend this, so let's add it together and spend that.
Right.
Whereas to us, we're like, what is the least expensive place where we can live comfortably and
Oh,
have what we want
amazing.
to open up
Right.
more room in our budget for the other things that are
Travel.
for travel.
Yeah.
Actually, we love to travel. We love to generosity is another big one for us. We
Mhm.
love to be able to treat people that we love to things. So
Mhm.
I think always coming back to this conversation of what are our values and is our spending aligned with those has helped us to kind of meet in the middle of his inclination to
Right.
hold on to everything and my inclination
I
to
love
spend.
that value based. I love that. So, uh, one thing I want to address though is the fact that you are financially independent. The fact that you make your own money. Do you feel that that gives you a little bit more leeway to do what you want with your money? Do you feel that?
I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, yes, maybe to some extent. I think if I were to unpack it in a very layered way, we've each had moments in the relationship where one makes more than the other,
Hmm.
and maybe where one's job is more demanding than the other's
Right.
job in that moment. And I think that we really try to just support each other through that, and we really think about what our goals are for the long term
Hmm.
and in the span of our long careers. So I think couples, all different couples handle money so differently.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it may be surprising that I don't just definitively
Yeah.
immediately say yes. But yes, no, I think knowing that we just always support each other and contribute to kind of our family and that
Right.
our values align. I mean, one thing that I was telling him about this podcast and
Mhm.
saying, do you have any ideas of what I could talk about
Uh-huh.
when it comes to us? And he mentioned to me that, years ago, he wouldn't have understood necessarily that I, would love, like, for me getting a blowout before an event, like
Yeah.
that, or
That is
before,
it.
yes, like, or before, a big meeting or
Right.
something, he may have thought that was frivolous before, wouldn't have
Hmm.
understood. And now, because he knows me so well, he understands that that may be the difference between me feeling like I don't show up as the best version of
Right.
myself or me feeling confident.
Right.
So he said that, he's really come to understand that spending money on the things that help you show up as the best version of
Mhm.
yourself is important. So I think
Right.
I guess I just don't feel like I have to even explain myself to him at this point
Sure.
because he
Right.
understands it. I also finally splurged on the Dyson Airwrap, and I haven't gotten a blowout since.
I
I
have
really I
one.
love it.
My
I'm like,
fiancé
"The
got it to
best
me for
money
my
I've ever
birthday.
spent."
Yeah,
Yes,
a few
I love
years ago. It's amazing.
yes,
Yeah, it
yeah,
is incredible. It is. It is.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's really good that you guys understand each other because you guys are both financially independent, and I think it works for you. I think that sometimes when there is a huge discrepancy versus like one person doesn't work or the other person's the only one that's working, then they have, the power structure changes. The power structure shifts a little bit.
Mm,
And that's what I noticed in my parents' marriage is that when my mom stopped working, then my dad started to have a lot more power and a lot more say so in the relationship. And not to say that all marriages are like that, right? But I think it's always good when women are financially independent because, your husband knows that, okay, yeah, you're getting a blowout and you're paying for it. Like I always say, I'm high maintenance, but I maintain
right.
myself. Right?
I've said almost that exact thing before about
Yeah.
not just about paying, but I'm high maintenance, but I know how to take care of myself, and that comes down to, like, I know exactly what I need in the morning to have my,
Right.
like, what kind
Right.
how I need my coffee, but I'll do it myself,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. Exactly. Exactly. So this has been so much fun, Madeline. Thank you so much. What is the next step for you here? So you're deputy editor at Cosmo. Like, what's the next step?
We're having so much fun. I really It's funny, I've been so busy these past couple of weeks, and when, the end of the summer is usually, like, a slower time in the
Yeah.
world, it's like, where is this pause?
Right.
And yeah, we're working on some really exciting things. I
Great.
I love the how does the saying go that the day you plant the seed isn't the day you bear the fruit?
Right.
I kind of feel
Yes.
like,
I posted that
yes.
on Instagram
Oh
today.
my god, that's
That's
so wait, what?
yes.
Wild. I didn't even
I
see that
posted
today.
that on Instagram today.
That is so
Yes.
what a wild coincidence.
Yeah.
I love that saying, and
Yeah.
I feel like I am starting to have all these little seedlings that need watering. We're working on some very exciting projects here. So hopefully,
Wonderful.
yeah, more things to come.
And one thing I want to touch on before I let you go, because I think this is so important to talk about, is that Cosmo really has come a long way. Right. And that's one thing I want to mention is that I remember when I were younger, it was all about how to get him to love you.
How to please your
Yeah, how to
man.
please your
Yes,
man,
yes.
how to look good when he comes home.
Yes.
And now it really has become a magazine that empowers women, right? In their finances and in their confidence levels. And, kudos to Cosmo because I think, and it's people like you that bring so much to the table to the magazine and that have so much to offer. And I think that's where you get just really a change and shift that Cosmo has had. Do you notice that as well?
Thank you so much for saying that. I'm thrilled to hear that that's been apparent to you.
Yes.
Our editor in chief, Jessica Giles, is very adamant about that
Right.
that vision for Cosmo that our reader we have so much respect for,
Right.
and we want to speak to them in that way of
Yeah.
providing them support in always their life. I think if somebody hasn't picked up a Cosmo or visited our site
Mhm.
in a few years or in a long time, I
Right.
think they definitely should because it
Absolutely.
may not be what they remember.
Yes, absolutely. You guys would be surprised. Go and just get the latest edition of Cosmo, and then you're gonna wanna get it every month
We'll have to
because
send you back with one of the we've
oh,
got
I would
we'll have
love
to have
that. I
to
would
send
love
one
that.
with
Yes, it's
you.
just there's I really like it now, I guess I should say. I was a little resistant earlier on because I'm like, I don't wanna know what I should wear when I come home from work or when he comes
Right.
home from work.
Sweatbands,
Yeah,
right?
I
Yeah,
don't care
yeah.
about that. But, it's really done a great job in empowering women. So if that is the vision, that is happening. So thank you so much again for being on the podcast.
Thank
It was a
you.
true pleasure. You are a woman that's so educated, so smart, but yet so down to earth. You're living in a big city and you're just such a kind, sweet person. Thank you for joining us. And, we'd love to have you back on.
Thank you so much. Anytime. Thank you. That's so kind.
Of course. And thank you guys for listening. I hope that you guys got as much from this podcast as I did. Make sure to subscribe and like and also rate the podcast. That's the way it keeps going. And until next time, never forget that a man is not a financial plan.